Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, where we still talk about RPGs from back in the day and today, still live from the northwest of England, still surrounded by my stuff, representing for the gamers across the world, hitting those criticals with a low roll there. This is the second part of episode 61, which was all about Star Frontiers. Yeah, you shouldn't see this as an extra. You should see it as a glossy module that is indispensable. We have another entry into Appendix G this episode, our very own response to Appendix N, where we are creating a never-ending list of recommendations to inspire your games. This time, we invite long-serving Grog Squad member Wayne Peters to add Jerry Anderson's Space 1999. Also in the room of role-playing rambling is Blythe, our resident rules lawyer, and we've used our library use role to reach down a couple of Star Frontiers adventures from the great library of RPGs to investigate. In this segment, we look at The Dark Side of the Moon by Jim Bambra and Face of the Enemy by Ken Rolson. We were interrupted when we recorded this face-to-face after the first 4 minutes. We tried again online and were hit by technical gremlins as soon as we started. So we've resorted to a phone call this time. Don't worry, next time we'll get back to normal and we shall be heading for the pub. I'll see you at the end of this one for some parish notices after our closing time chat. Ramblers, let's get rambling.
Appendix G. Welcome to Appendix G, the part of the podcast where we invite a specially selected member of the GOG Squad to come on board and add to our ever-expanding list of recommendations. And this time I'm delighted to welcome Wayne Peters. Hello there, Wayne.
Hello there. I thought you added those things in post. I didn't realise you did them live.
Oh yeah, it's like I do them just to make Blythe laugh. I do it when he's least expecting it. That's the idea. It's good to have you on, Wayne, because you're a long time contributor to the stuff that we do. You've done art for us along the way, and you joined in some of our games. So it's good to have you on.
Really quite nice to be here.
And I've invited you on because you've got a good recommendation that's fitting with the episode this time, but also because you were a Star Frontiers player.
I was a long time ago, but I was, yeah. We didn't have the Prime Directive like you did, but there was a kind of an unspoken kind of thing with our group or sort of arrangement with our group where if someone ran a game, no one else wanted to run it. You know, everyone wanted to run something different. So it was a similar sort of thing. I'd already bagged Traveller because I bought it off a kid in my class who'd obviously had it for Christmas. I had no idea what to do with it. So I had Traveller, I was running that. So my friend Adrian, fantasy author Adrian Selby, he got a copy of Star Frontiers and he ran it. My main memory of it really is being thoroughly bored doing Starship combat. Because he had both things. He had the Alpha Dawn role playing game, and then the Nighthawks. Was it Nighthawks the spaceship combat? Yeah, or spaceship rules anyway. My memory of that is it sort of revolved around the pilot and the gunner, and the rest of us kind of sat there staring at the smash hits posters on the walls. Bananarama and Annie Lennox, I think, if I remember right.
I think you got the best deal there.
I did like the setting though. I've always liked the setting. It's kind of it's whilst I haven't played it since the 80s. It's a setting that I sort of come back to again and again because it's a really kind of rich. What I found was with Traveller, whilst it gives you the tools to create an entire galaxy if you want to, Star Frontiers gave you just, I think it was about a dozen worlds, a dozen star systems, and a handful of alien races that you could play just straight out of the box. and it was whereas Traveller gave you a handful of chain codes, this actually fleshed out some of the worlds and gave you an actual setting that you could hit the ground running in. And it was a really interesting setting. I mean, it's helped by, you had the artwork of Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley and the other TSR house artists, and that really brought it to life as well. So it was a really interesting setting. I seem to remember not caring for the rules much, though. There's nothing wrong with them, but just not. They didn't really float my boat.
There's not many rules to speak of, really. It's mainly a percentage roll for most things, and I suppose it's very similar to Gangbusters, if you ever played that. But yeah, it has very little. I've never done the spaceship combat, so I've never given that a try. We always had them planet based.
Well, to be fair, we were probably doing it wrong because it was so complicated. I think obviously as an adult and a seasoned role player now, I'd probably try and make sure that everybody had something to do during the space combat. Whereas back then it was just, you just fly about and shoot things, so everybody else gets to just come along for the ride.
I think it's interesting what you say about the setting, because it is the case that it has a bit of a space opera narrative background as well, so the enemies are clearly defined, and that's something that isn't apparent in Traveller, is it?
I mean, there's a setting sort of implied in Traveller, and obviously they fleshed it out into the Spinwood Marches and the rest of the galaxy and added races in, so the setting arrived eventually, but as I say, Star Frontiers just came in the box. It was there already, and they expanded upon it, but there was something there to actually tuck into straight away. And they were really interesting alien creatures as well. So I love the Dralocytes, the little blobby characters. They were fabulous.
And they've inspired some artwork from you as well, because that's your job, isn't it? Day job, creating models and artwork. So they have inspired you, haven't they?
They have, yeah. I did. As I say, it's a setting I come back to from time to time. It is quite inspiring. So yeah, I did. I don't know what you've seen. There was a Dralocyte illustration and a Rusk miniature that I sculpted for 3D printing. I have it on my desk in front of me here. There he is.
Wow, there he is.
Yeah, great radio.
And of course, Star Frontiers was a feature of Imagine magazine, and I know that Imagine magazine was a big part of your early years of role playing. And you've started a thread on our Discord looking back at issue by issue, month by month. Yeah, so talk us through that. What's your connection with Imagine, and what's it like going back to it?
Well, it was my magazine of choice, because I mean it's partly of how I got into role playing in the first place. My dad bought it for me, issue 12, I think it was, thinking it was a computer magazine, because I had my Commodore 64 and I was quite into home computing, and he just thought it was a computer games magazine. And I absolutely lapped it up. It was, you had the Rodney Matthews cover, The Guardian Awakes, and then there's all this just fabulous kind of game-related stuff inside, and this thing called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It was all fantastic. So yeah, I just started collecting Imagine magazine for no particular reason. So I used to read White Dwarf as well, because my mates used to get it. So I kind of had both, but Imagine was the magazine that I bought. I can't remember why now, but that was the one. And this read through something I've been thinking about for a few years. I started reading through about 3 or 4 years ago, and then I kind of lost steam on it. But I thought it would be great this year, being the 40th anniversary. I could wait till the 50th, but I might not even be here then. So I thought let's go with the 40th, and I thought it'd be great to just month by month read through each issue and just get a sort of an idea of what the landscape looked like 40 years ago this month, kind of thing. How role-playing games were approached, how people kind of muddled through some of the issues of the day. I mean, so far we've only looked at issue 1, so there's no letters to speak of, but I'm really looking forward to getting into the letters in later issues, where people start having a discourse back and forth. I know it gets a bit kind of snarky on a number of occasions, but there's it'll be interesting to see the attitudes that people had towards certain subjects. This kind of emergence of the narrative gamer from what was mainly, it was gamey sort of games back then, wasn't it? You played it as a game, not as a sort of a storytelling experience. So yeah, and it's nice to see. It'd be interesting to see things like that emerge in the magazine.
Yeah, I said this before on the podcast. With Imagine, I always found it a lot more engaging as a magazine compared with White Dwarf, in that it was the first magazine that recognised that there were people actively playing these games out there in the country, and you got convention reports. It had its famous fanzine section, and that was the first time I got any sense really of the audience out there.
It was mainly, it's much more D&D focused, and it's obviously a TSR house mag, so it's going to be. So that was for me the primary difference between that and White Dwarf. White Dwarf it felt zappier. It felt kind of more, I don't know. TSR just felt not dry. That's a bit unkind. But it was more. It seemed to be more sort of thoughtful and less trying to kind of entertain and sort of audience please. And then White Dwarf was very kind of, it had things like, you'd have Judge Dredd in there, and they'd have superhero games, and there was more kind of, not more exciting stuff, but there's a lot more variety in it, I suppose, because they were covering a lot more bases. But as a result, people were constantly complaining that they never covered this or they never covered that, and it's whereas TSR really didn't have that problem with Imagine, because it was largely just Dungeons and Dragons. So there's plenty in every issue.
Yeah, and you observe that they featured fiction as well on a regular basis.
Yeah,
and I, like you, used to be resentful of the pages taken up by the fiction.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd start reading it and I'd think, oh, what is this? And just resentful. The thing is, I'm looking forward to reading them now, because there's probably some really kind of interesting and thought-provoking ideas in there. I mean, the fiction in the first issue wasn't great, to be fair, but it was. The thing is, it was imagining this kind of future VR kind of role-playing system. This idea that you would have a VR-based computer role-playing system in your house, and then obviously because we have that kind of thing these days, looking back at what this guy thought it would be like it can be quite funny. But you have to kind of give him that. If he could have seen the future, he wouldn't be making his money writing books. He'd be inventing the technology. So
yeah. I think every time I read a story in there, I was trying to think, how can I use this? I just can't make the connection between this and gaming. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds over the coming months. Wayne, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it.
So what are you offering to put into our long list of recommendations to the Grog Squad?
Well, I am offering Space 1999, science fiction TV series that ran for 2 seasons between 1976 and 1977.
Excellent. I'm going to make an admission. I have never seen Space 1999. I was aware of it. I think I've mentioned previously that I never had control of the television when I was at home, apart from on a Saturday morning when I used to watch Tiswas and Swap Shop. But I never really saw these space operas as they played out. So what's the pitch for Space 1999?
The core concept of it is set up in the first episode. Really, you've got Commander Koenig, played by Martin Landau, arrives on Moonbase Alpha, which is it's an established moon base with about the size of a small town, with an international crew. It's a completely international crew, and they're getting ready for the first manned mission to the newly discovered planet Meta. But unfortunately, Commander Koenig finds the base in disarray because Alphans have been contracting a space madness and dying, which is causing some dismay. Now, apparently this space madness has been caused by magnetic radiation that's building up around the old nuclear dumps. Before anything can be done about this, the nuclear dumps explode, and with a nuclear explosion so vast, so massive, it sends the moon hurtling off out of our solar system and off on its adventures. With the Earth in disarray because of obviously the atmospheric chaos caused by having no moon, they can't mount a rescue operation. And as a sheer coincidence, the moon is on a direct heading for the planet Meta. So Commander Koenig decides that that's where their destiny lies, and that's where they'll find their fate. And off they set. Interestingly, the planet Meta is never ever mentioned again in the show's entire run. They completely forget about it. But what you essentially have then is Earth's moon traveling through space, apparently fast enough to reach new star systems within a few days, but passing by those star systems slow enough they can have several sort of shuttle journeys between the moon and this new planet before it adventures, and then before it gradually then passes on.
So the structure is essentially a planet a week, is it? Is that the idea, that they visit a new system each week?
You occasionally have alien spaceships will rock up on the moon. They'll just be on their way through deep space, and an alien spaceship will show up. Christopher Lee shows up in one as Captain Xantor, which was actually there was a series of dolls in the 70s of Space 1999 characters, and Captain Xantor was one of them. My friend had him. I was really jealous. But it kind of, the thing is, it's essentially Christopher Lee in heavy eyeshadow, and that was one of the shortcomings of the show, was they spent an absolute fortune on the sets and the model work and the production values, and it really was movie quality effects and camera work on a weekly TV show. But with all that money spent on that, they had very little left for sort of guest stars and alien makeup. And I mean, they got through, but it kind of showed at the seams quite often. Yes, and quite often they'd run into aliens that were essentially just sort of points of light that would float around, because that was essentially all they could afford. So, yeah.
So you had Martin Landau, and was there a crew as well, a cast of characters to support it?
There was Prentice Hancock, who showed up a lot in sort of 70s TV. He showed up in Doctor Who and a few other things as well, usually as a shouty character. But he was Paul. I remember thinking he was the coolest guy ever when I was little. I think now my favourite character is Alan Carter, the Eagle pilot. Xenia Merton as Sandra Baines as well is a really fun character. I honestly prefer the supporting cast to the two principal characters. I just found them more interesting, really.
So you mentioned the eagle, and that's the thing I remember from it, because all the kids at school had the eagle dinky toy. So that's the shuttle that takes them to different adventures, is it?
Yes, that's what I think most people love about the show, is the Eagle transporter. It was one of the stars of the show, I think, and the model work on it was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was designed by Joe Johnston, I think, who went on to work on Star Wars. But yes, that's quite often you go to fan sites, and that's the main thing there, is the Eagle transporter.
When we pick these for Appendix G, it's mainly to think about how we can use them for games. So have you used this as an inspiration of games, or how would you use it, and how does it fit with gaming?
Well, it's something I've had on a back burner for probably a couple of decades. I've been wanting to run a Space 1999 game for a long time, and I think I've gone through numerous rule systems, and originally it was Classic Traveller, I think, and I went through Star Wars D6 and Savage Worlds and the old Last Unicorn game, Star Trek, as well. And I actually finally ran a game. I think it was for Virtual Owlbear and Wizard staff last year. Unfortunately, the game was a bit of a damp squib, unfortunately. The scenario I wrote was a bit too linear, and I've messed up the boss fight at the end as well, so it was a bit of an anticlimax, sadly. But the game itself, I actually used Star Trek Adventures, the Modiphius Star Trek Adventures, because I figured that that it would map onto Space 1999 effortlessly, really, and it did. It worked really well because it's a very similar setup, although the difference being, whereas the crew of the Enterprise can pilot the Starship Enterprise wherever they want to go, the Moon just takes the Alphans to the situation and they have to deal with it. And that in itself can be quite interesting to use in a campaign, in the sense that they can't just nuke it from orbit or fly away. The trouble comes at them and they've got to deal with it before the Moon shifts on again. So yeah, you've got stun guns for phasers, you've got comm locks for communicators, you've got the various departments are similar to Star Trek in that you have these wonderful kind of these uniforms designed by, I think it was Rudy Gernrich, fashion designer in the 70s. Sylvia Anson apparently was chummy with him and got him to design this the uniform for the Alphans. And so you've got this beige kind of two-piece sort of top and trousers with one coloured arm to denote the department, in the same way that Star Trek has the red, yellow, and blue tops. So it all works. It all fits over Star Trek effortlessly. So that worked really well. And I think that was what I would, if I were to run it again. I'd like to run it again, because like I say, I was disappointed with the way the game went. And the players were fabulous; they're a great bunch, but I was just disappointed with the way the game ran. And so I would really like to do it again. But I think something that occurred to me though afterwards was the show itself is sort of, it's a show of two halves really. You've got first and second season, and the first season is very much inspired by kind of early pre-Star Wars cerebral sci-fi, 2001: A Space Odyssey, mainly things like Silent Running and that kind of thing. And it's all very portentous and kind of doom laden, and there's this sense of sense of kind of it's sort of pervasive sense of doom. Whereas the second season was overseen by a guy called Fred Freiberger, who had worked on Star Trek the Animated Show, and wanted it more zappy, wanted a younger cast. He binned a lot of the cast from the first series and replaced them with a cast that, to my eyes, looked the same age as the ones he got rid of, but he insisted they were a younger cast, and he wanted to be zappy, and he gave them these multicolored safari jackets to wear over their uniforms, and it all became a lot more pulp and adventurous. So as I say, it's a very different feel, and I often wonder if for the first season whether something like Call of Cthulhu might actually work quite well, if only because players, if you say, right, we're going to play Space 1999, but I'm going to use Call of Cthulhu, and I think the players would go into it, if they know Call of Cthulhu, would go into it expecting this kind of sense of doom, and this, just expecting their characters to go mad and die and being okay with that, so that might work quite well for atmosphere or sort of player expectations, maybe. But yeah, as myself, I think Star Trek Adventures, because it's a 2D20 is a system I really like anyway. It took me a long time to really take to it, but I do really like it now. I think it was Conan that sold me on it ultimately. So it's a system I like, and as I say, it works. It maps onto Space 1999 really easily. So,
and coming back to what you were saying earlier about the Starship combat, it is one where everyone can feel part of, building up momentum as part of the ship's crew.
Yeah, something Star Trek Adventures does really well. It really is. Everybody has something to do, and there's something for everybody to do as well. It's a nice thing with it. It actually gives examples of what each department can be doing during space battle. So even if you can't think of anything at that moment, you've got a menu you can choose from. So it's there's never a point where your character should be saying or needs to be saying, I don't know, I'll just look at the screen.
Or Bananarama, the bedroom wall.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wayne. That'll go on to the Appendix G. And of course, you'll be swimming in the grog tank with your continuing reread of Imagine. So look forward to that.
Yes, looking forward to that. Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Wayne.
Yeah, no worries. That's been
Library use. Welcome to the Zoom of role-playing rambling. I've got Blythe on the other end of the phone. Hello there, Blythe.
Hello, Dirk.
Calling in from your bunker to my bunker. We've had to do this twice, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. This is the second time. This is the third time, actually.
We just had technical gremlins. And the first time we tried to do this last week, we were interrupted by Phil, the IT guy, weren't we?
Phil, the IT guy, came in the cupboard with a computer on a trolley, which he then proceeded to set up and install.
And he tried to engage us with cable tie chat. I think he's prime suspect, for drinking that summer fruits cordial.
Yeah, well, I wonder whether, we were in there recording a podcast and he walked in and we had to then pretend we weren't recording a podcast and just pretend we were having a brew and a chat. But he came in. I wonder if he came in to have some of the summer fruits and put his feet up. And the computer's just a bit of a ruse, it pushes around in a trolley. You see him a lot, don't you? Pushing computers around on a trolley. What's he doing? Where's he going? Like some hospital porter for a computer, pushing it around in his sick bed. And I think he'd come in to have some summer fruits. We were there. Then he had to go through the rigmarole of setting the computer up. All I wanted was a glass of summer fruits. A glass of out-of-date summer fruits. That's all I wanted.
And the tide mark a little lower on the summer fruits as it ever evaporates.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of this. Library use is when we reach down in the great library of RPGs and pull a couple of items off the shelf for a deep discussion. I was going to say deep and detailed discussion, but it might not. We're going to try and avoid spoilers as much as we can, but inevitably we're going to ruin a couple of these adventures that we're going to look at. But my starting point for all of this, as you know, is Heroic Worlds, a history and guide to role-playing games by Lauren Stick. And you know who Lauren Stick is, don't you?
He wrote Staff and Tears, I believe.
He did, yeah. And you know that because I've asked you 3 times.
You asked. I was going to say I only know that because you asked me 3 times. The first time you asked me, just before Phil walked in, I wasn't so sure. But now I know it's him because we've done it 3 times. I could answer that with confidence. He wrote Staff and Tears.
He did. It was the original design. He worked for TSR, and he was the editor of Deities and Demigods. And if you remember from the interview with Ben Riggs, he pointed out that he was most put out by the fact that the royalty situation on Star Frontiers. Now, in this book, it is a catalogue and it has different inputs from different games designers of that period in 1991 when it came out. But I want to read to you the beginning of the entry of Star Frontiers. Okay, science fiction system with an introductory level rules. The systems were originally designed for players aged 14 and up, and then heavily reside without playtesting for younger players, resulting in some very muddled rules. It's not that he's bitter or anything.
It's no bitterness there, isn't there? Yeah. Is that the only entry in the whole book where he's actually quite critical of the game?
I think earlier on he just said that it was designed by committee. I suppose giving a sense how things were changing at TSR at the time that Star Frontiers came out, but a bit of an undercurrent there. But it is a great book, this. I know that some people say, oh, well, it's a bit out of date now and you should turn to the internet. But I think it's frozen in time. In 1991, it gives you an unvarnished look at the games when we went into deep freeze.
Yeah, it's of its time, isn't it? So it's as perceived then rather than updated and altered with the last 20 odd, 30 odd years.
Yeah, it's almost like it was frozen with us, this book.
Like a relic from Tutankhamun's tomb. It's been unearthed with us, brought back to life. This was found. Yeah.
Clinging on to it. It does make the distinction because obviously science fiction is a broad category. And he determines that what we're talking about here and with Traveller, it's actually science fiction adventure. So its characteristics are interstellar travel, alien species, all the weird and wonderful stuff with that, new planets, robots and ray guns.
Yeah.
That's fair enough, isn't it? It is a very
Yeah.
distinct. It's distinctive from like dark future stuff, like Aftermath and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely shiny spaceships and sliding doors and laser blasters and that kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And owing a debt to those science fiction serials that were on at the cinema back in the 30s, I guess, on the TV with Star Trek.
Yeah, and I suppose those of the 70s as well. There were things like that knocking around 70s, weren't there? I mean, I know the Buck Rogers is a sore point, isn't it? Obviously.
So I'm going to, from this book, I'm going to do a prefab sprite game. Okay, so if you remember why this works, I've got here. I've got 5 adventures that I've plucked from this list for various games, and there's one ringer in there, one that I've made up. What you've got to do is listen to it. You can play this at home. Well, you are playing it at home, as we always say, but people who are listening can play it as well. Let's see.
I am playing it at home, but other people can as well.
Yeah. So, well, listen, see if you can spot the ringer here. Are you ready?
No, I've got to spot the Duff one, the one that isn't real, haven't I? Just
the one I've made up.
People are playing at home. Get the rules right. As a rules lawyer, get the rules right. Yeah, it's the one that you've made up. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. First one.
Yeah.
Lost Telepaths. The Secrets of the House of Kashmir. Lost Telepaths. The Secrets of the House of Kashmir. How does that sound?
That sounds dubious. I mean,
okay.
Lost Telepaths is okay. But the House of Kashmir? That sounds like something you find in one of those shops that sells wool or something. House of Kashmir. You know, like a picture of a young Roger Moore in a cardigan on the front.
Welcome to the House of Kashmir.
Yeah.
For all your woolen needs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your House of Kashmir. That sounds... Well, I'm immediately suspicious of that one. But I know the game. I know the game you play. I know the game you play. Is he double bluffing? The House of Kashmir sounds stupid. So, but that's what you do. I know what you do. You put that in deliberately to throw me off the scent. So continue.
Okay, that's on the doubtful pile then. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't know if it is on the doubtful pile because I think you just do. House of Kashmir. You'll have seen that and thought, "Oh, House of Kashmir." That sounds rubbish. You'll fall for that. So I don't know if it is on the doubtful pile. But anyway, go on.
Satellite Riders, Operation Murdoch. Satellite Riders, Operation Murdoch.
Operation Murdoch. Well, that sounds made up. That's just something you make up. But then, Sky, maybe, a bit of kind of politics, bit of parody there, a bit of
Darthanian Queen. Darthanian Queen.
Darthanian Queen.
Darthanian Queen.
What are these again?
They're science fiction adventures, as listed in Heroic Worlds, a history and guide to role-playing games.
Not for Star Frontiers, just for any.
Just for any. Yeah.
Darthanian Queen. For different games or the same game?
No, they're all different games.
Different games, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Operation Peregrine. Quonchinont Conspiracy. The Quonchinont Conspiracy. Operation Peregrine. The Quonchinont Conspiracy.
So far,
good these, aren't
they? I don't never describe them as good, but they're certainly difficult to tease out an obvious contender to be made up. I mean, I know they're all made up because that's where they're made up, but one you've made up, if you know what I mean.
Okay, last one is Rotten to the Core. Rotten to the Core. So which of those is the ringer? So talk me through that. Which ones are you going for?
Initially, I thought the House of Kashmir sounded ridiculous, but I think Satellite Riders and Murdoch thing. But then I don't know. You see, that might be plausible because that is that someone doing a bit of satire? They're all taken from that book, aren't they?
All taken from this book, 1991. Heroic Worlds, a history and guide to role-playing games by Lawrence Stick. Is it sticking yet?
1991. Satellite TV. Was that just coming in 1991, or was it later than 91? So would someone have thought, "Oh, this is very funny. because Murdoch, Sky, and satellite TV. Maybe that's a bit of parody, attempt at parody. D'Artagnan Queen. Just seems, I don't know. It's just wrong about the name, D'Artagnan Queen. No. So I'm thinking, I'm wondering if D'Artagnan Queen. What was the fourth one? I think Rotten to the Course seems okay. I can imagine
Operation Peregrine.
Yeah, Operation Peregrine. That.
Don't make me say that word again.
I want you to say Peregrine. As in Peregrine, Peregrine. As in like a peregrine falcon.
Yeah, and it's got a subtitle that I might not say this the same way as I said it previously. The Quantinuant Conspiracy. Quantinuant Conspiracy.
Right, I'll tell you what.
Go on. I'm going to have to push you on this.
You're going to have to push me on it. I'm going to say D'Artagnan Queen. Only because if it's not made up by you, it should be. I'm going to go on that basis.
D'Artagnan Queen.
Yeah.
D'Artagnan Queen was a supplement for Traveller created by the Judges Guild. You know those ones? Those
was
little.
It?
Yeah, for Traveller.
Never heard of it.
A subsidised merchant craft with 3 scenarios, and it included one that had a monster on board. The Lost Telepaths, The Secrets of the House of Kashmir. The House of Kashmir. That was actually Space Master. So, the derivative of Rollmaster. Yeah. Operation Peregrine, the Quincy Conspiracy. You could tell that I haven't made that up because I'd have chosen a word I could say.
Yeah, you chose a word. I did think that. He just, although no, it's you, isn't it? I mean, we're both guilty of overcomplicating a name. Yeah.
Space Opera, Fantasy Games Unlimited, which I always coveted.
Yeah.
I've got a copy of it now, and I need to feel ready to play that game. But I do think that at some point I will play that game. I used to have it in Odyssey 7, and I used to look at it and I just thought, this is my way of getting into the Traveller space without breaking the Prime Directive. But anyway, Space Opera FGU, although I'd have to change the Quunchy Nunch.
You'd have to change that.
Because I can't say it. Anyway, Rotten to the Core is a GDW Traveller 2300. And the one I made up was, you were feeling it, weren't you? Satellite Riding Operation Murdoch.
I was. Yeah, I kind of felt. I just thought D'Artagnan Queen said it. The thing with D'Artagnan Queen, I thought, you're making a science fiction supplement or adventure, and you've used the word Darth Vader. Seemed that you would immediately go, if you were writing that and you thought D'Artagnan Queen, you'd look at it and go, oh, that's like Darth Vader, I'll change that because it's like Darth Vader. Oh, it doesn't seem right, doesn't quite fit. Do you know what I mean? That's why it seemed implausible. But,
I was riffing off the Sky Raiders. Do you remember the Sky Raiders series? FASA brought out. I think Games Workshop distributed, didn't they? I'm pretty sure that we played those, didn't we?
Played that.
We might have talked.
We played that, yeah.
They were beige, weren't they, rather than black? The books
they were beige with like pencil kind of illustrations. They seemed a bit more exciting than travel stuff because they did have illustrations in.
Last time we were ruminating on the Ian Livingstone statement that actually he preferred fantasy adventures to fantasy films and science fiction films to science fiction adventures. And I was saying, well, I like science fiction adventures. I think that there's more to them. There's more breadth and scope than for medieval settings and adventures.
There is, I suppose there is. Yeah, there is.
Last time you said it's very, very hard to do science fiction well. It puts more onus on the games master to describe and look at the world. And everybody, as usual, agreed with you.
Well, it's because it's true.
I can see that bit's true, but I'm going to have another go at trying to argue that out of all the scenarios that have been published and produced, I think the strongest ones are usually ones that are either in a contemporary espionage setting or they're in a science fiction setting. I just think it gives the writer and the players a lot more scope than
Well, I think
before.
I would agree with you. I don't think we'd disagree, though, are we, on it? Because I think I think that you're right. There is more scope in a science fiction scenario, and we've found that there's all these planets in traveller games that you can go to, and some of them can be quite primitive, some of them can be very high tech. So you can do crash on a planet, got to survive. It's primitive. The people there are primitive, and it's not very sci-fi. It's not very high tech. And then you can go to the extreme, can't you? You can do all sorts of things with sci-fi. So I don't think it's that they're not. It's not that they're not flexible and you can do more with them. You probably can, can't you? Because as you say, it's a fantasy setting, kind of straight-jacketed to some extent into that world, aren't you? I mean, my argument is just that it's difficult. It's perhaps because of that flexibility, it becomes difficult. It's more of a challenge to create atmosphere and create the setting detail and that kind of thing. That's what can be difficult, I think.
But what I'd say is because there is a tradition, isn't there? There's a tradition and a repertoire of television series and film that are in this science fiction adventure setting. You don't have that in fantasy, do you? It's only relatively recently that they've started to build up, arguably since the success of Lord of the Rings, that you started to get serials that are more fantasy orientated, because prior to that you probably got serial adaptations of Conan and things like that, but it is relatively new, isn't it, the fantasy film and TV series, whereas you have got a wealth of stuff to draw on when it comes to science fiction. And
that is also one of the ways you do it, isn't it? When we run sci-fi, you do sort of say, right, this is a bit like Blake Seven, this is a bit Star Trek, this is a bit. You kind of refer to those films that you've seen. So yeah, you do that.
Let's pull a couple of these adventures off the shelf now. With at this period when it came out, I think this was a peak of a new age of writing adventures for role playing, and there were some really good proponents of game design and adventure design. A lot of them were working in Star Frontiers. So you've got like the early ones were done by Moldray and Mark Akers, who were doing stuff for Gangbusters. But the ones that we're going to look at, they have Ken Rolson and Jim Bambra. And Jim Bambra obviously went on to work for Games Workshop and produce the Enemy Within campaign, amongst other things. So there are really good writers working on Star Frontiers. I think it benefits from that. So we're each going to have a look at an adventure each. So which one have you got?
I've got Face of the Enemy. That's by Ken Rolson.
And I'm going to look at Dark Side of the Moon by Jim Bambra. And we could have picked any really from these, because they're an interesting collection, I think, the Star Frontiers ones. And they are available on Drive-Thru RPG. And they did have tie-ins as well with 2001.
So I imagine that as well, this one, Mad Computer. Mad Computer is quite a good sort of role-playing thing, isn't it? But I'm not sure the rest of it. Interesting. Yeah, I'd like to read that.
I think it was notable because of its deck plans. I think that was its main attraction. It didn't look anything like the rest of the Star Frontiers collection.
Well, I would imagine, it's based on 2000. It doesn't quite fit with the Star Frontiers kind of model, does it? As we were saying earlier, what Star Frontiers is all about is ray guns and silver suits, and so it's not quite 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah, it says here, featuring the Spaceship Discovery and the computer HAL 9000, includes new skills and a large map of the Discovery. Let's start with you then. Let's have a look at what you've got there. Face of the Enemy.
Yes.
So what's the pitch? What's the convention pitch? Why would I sign up to this game? Come on.
Well, I suppose the pitch is that this adventure is about literally getting to grips with the Sathar, who are the villains of Star Frontiers, these kind of worm-like evil worm-like aliens who want to take over the universe.
In direct conflict with the rest
Yeah.
and human civilizations, aren't they? The rest of the pangalactic thing.
But of course, what they do is they in the games they tend to use the other races against each other, don't they? So they tend to employ agents, don't they, rather than deal with it themselves. So this adventure is all about, ultimately, it doesn't quite start off that way, but it's ultimately about capturing one of the Sathar, because they've never been captured. They have a kind of suicide switch in them, so they kind of die when they get captured. But this adventure, without too many spoilers, there's something that you discover about the Sathar, which means you can kind of get around that potentially. That's the pitch, I think. It's to catch a Sathar, really. That's what it's really about. It's an adventure. But that's kind of at the end, because it is in three acts. They're quite interesting. I was quite impressed by it, actually, I must admit. You get to look at these old things. We've looked at a lot of old things on this podcast. And often we find them wanting, don't we, by comparison to modern games or modern scenarios. But it's very good, actually. I was quite impressed. I looked at it and thought you could, whilst you might not want to run it for Star Frontiers, but if you were doing a traveller campaign or something like that, you could build this in and it would stand up. It would stand up and it would work even now, because it's quite cleverly put together, I think. And I suppose it stands at odds a bit with the D&D, even though it's like TSR. So people say, Star Frontiers, it's like D&D in space, isn't it? There you go. That's D&D in space. D&D with laser guns, because it's TSR. But this adventure's not really like the D&D adventures of the time in many ways. It's got a bit more subtlety to it, I think. It starts off where you have to go to a planet with a primitive race on this planet who've they've had an encounter with the Sathar, and it's not gone well, because of course the Sathar are evil worms who want to take over the universe. So it's not gone well. You have to go there, and there's like language barriers, cultural barriers, and things like that. And the first act is you have to negotiate and befriend this primitive alien race. And it's interesting because it's not fighty, it's not like D&D. It's not like, there's a tribe of orcs right over the hill, go and kill them all and take their treasure and save the village. That it's not like that at all. These primitive aliens, you have to befriend them and talk to them and communicate with them. And it makes quite a big deal about communication, like the idea of drawing pictures and things like that, where you can't speak to them. You have to work out what's gone on this planet. And the experience point awards, you get more experience points for peaceful negotiation, and you get far less if it all goes pear-shaped and you end up fighting with them. It does get fighty later on, but the initial bit of it, first act, is not fighty at all.
I've got a copy of it here, and I'm just looking at the back of it, the referee briefing. So this is the Notui, is it, that they encounter? Yeah. So they're a kind of, for the benefit of listeners, they're kind of a vulture humanoid with very large thighs.
Don't laugh at the thighs.
They seem to be living on this planet without any predators or any opposition, and this opposition has been invited, and they're trying to get their heads around it a little bit, aren't they? The new threat.
And then the second act is you investigate a crashed Sathar spaceship, and then the third act is you have to then go into the heart of a Sathar space station to try and capture one of the Sathar. So it does build up to kind of becoming fighty. But even going into the space station, your job is to really try and capture one of the Sathar rather than kill them all. That's the whole thing. So even that's not quite as straightforward as just go in and blow the place up. It's not like a Death Star, the space station, go and destroy it. You can destroy it afterwards, but the idea is to capture one of these Sathar. But I think I was quite impressed, actually. Pretty well thought out, well structured, quite well written, well put together. Like I say, as a structure with these three acts.
It's surprisingly concise, isn't it? It's not overwritten. It's campaign mode, isn't it? But it's in 30 pages. When you think of, I'm currently doing that Conan campaign. And that's kind of a thick book, isn't it? But there's
Yeah.
quite a lot of material in here, isn't there, for a few pages, including the deck plans to this Sather spaceship, which you have to explore. Quite a lot packed into it.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot in it. It's a shame as well, in as much as I'm not sure it would necessarily work as a one shot. Because when I was reading it, I thought, hey, good, this is a one shot, wouldn't it, with a convention? But I'm not sure it would work as a one shot because it does have those 3 acts, and in a way, the fun of it is almost front loaded. That the negotiation bit is the most fun. The payoff
Yes,
is,
yeah.
you get a big fight at the end, but you've got to do all this other stuff. I'm not sure that would work as a one shot, but it's a shame because it's all right, good.
There is a risk with these modules. They are appealing as one shots, as in doing them as a convention type environment. I did it with a couple of these. I'm going to talk about Dark Side of the Moon, which I think you played, but I also did it with Bugs in the System at the last Grog meet, and that is a scenario that's in 2 acts. And the first act is essentially exploring this paralyzed spaceship, and it's very distinctive for this spaceship because it's inside a balloon and it's got a floating ice ball that's attached to it, and there's these shuttlecrafts that go in between, and it's mining these minerals, and there's been no anyway. There's loads to it, and essentially it's a floating dungeon. So that's the first half of it. Yet the second half is more interesting when you return to the main base and things start occurring. People start disappearing. Incidents start happening. And when you're when you're turning one of these into a one shot, you have to choose the point that is right. What's going to work best in a self-contained period? And I made the wrong choice because I went for the first part rather than the second part.
That is the problem. You look at it and think, well, I can't fit it all in, so I've got to fit a particular bit in, but am I picking the right bit? That problem as well, isn't it? That in your head as a gaming master, you think, yeah, this will work. And then when it gets, players get in contact with it, you think, would have been the other bit would have been better really with this group of players. But you don't know that till it's too late, do you?
There was an appeal of going through the arduous, as I say, floating dungeon spacecraft and discovering what was on board there, and then coming back and seeing what a pernicious impact it had on the main base whilst you were away. I was concerned whether you would get that same feeling if in a one shot you just turned up and had a backstory that explained that you just come from the abandoned space station. So yeah, a bit more success in turning Dark Side of the Moon by Jim Bamber into a convention one shot. This is it is I cannot underestimate how good this is. I mean, people say, oh well, compared with modern stuff, I think it stands up today. If this was released for Coriolis or some other game that's relevant today, people would say it's really strong because the central premise of it is very intelligently constructed. And I think what it gives it an advantage is the way that it's written. There is a lot of backstory to it, but it's revealed to the players. And there's a lot of incident in it and a lot of points of connection for the players to understand what's going on.
So go on, what's the pitch with this? Come on, what's your convention pitch with this?
Crater is a human colony, so it's a fairly desolate planet, but it's been commercialized by the Vrusk. So the Vrusk have come along, the insect type race, and they've kind of inspired the human colony into being more industrious and organized, as Vrusk would be, into turning this crater into a very productive mining planet. However, that has bred resentment from some of the human population, and there is a growing movement called the KLC, the Crater Liberation Corps, and they're masterminded by this scientist known as Jack L'Orange. And Jack L'Orange is the secret puppet master who is arranging for terrorist acts against the Vrusk and various schemes and plot to undermine their role on the planet, because he wants to restore the agrarian economy of the human settlement that was there previously. So that's like the core behind it.
Not D&D in space, then.
It is not D&D in space.
Funny thing about it, both adventures was peculiar in that sense, because the game itself, and there is laser guns and all that in it, of course there is, but the game itself sort of suggests, this is just going to be fight the bad guys, blow holes in things and all that. Whilst there is some of that, both adventures have some subtlety to them, don't they?
Yeah,
it's interesting.
There's a real appeal to this Dark Side of the Moon scenario, because this Jack Larange character is almost like an Elon Musk figure. So he's like part scientist, part entrepreneur, part industrialist. Could you say that he was evil, or is he just morally aloof and the ends justify the means kind of thing? So, his ideology is unclear. And part of how it works, this scenario, is there's a bit of a sandbox element in the middle of it. And all the different competing commercial houses of the Vrusk have a different attitude toward Larange. And as player characters, you have to negotiate your way through it. And ultimately, his plan is evil, and it's uncovering that evil scheme that he wants to ethnically cleanse the Vrusk, and he has ultimately has a genocide plan to do that. But yeah, it's very subtle and very cleverly constructed for you to discover that as you're going through it.
Last time we talked about it, it's a good game, and the scenarios are good. Yeah, surprising, I think. I mean, it does have a following, doesn't it? It does have a following, but I suppose it's not one of those games that necessarily springs to mind if you think of a great game from the past. But I'd say it is, both in terms of the game and in terms of the stuff that there is for it, the adventures that there is for it.
Yeah, I think mechanically, Shtick is probably right to complain that it is a bit muddled and it doesn't work, as we pointed out last time. But I just think the quality of the material that we produced, and I just think at this time, it's a bit overlooked how strong stuff was, because Gangbusters, we said the same thing, didn't we? It was the modules that were the real core strength behind it, and really gave you material that is written in a sophisticated way.
The game rules are muddled, but I don't think they're no worse than, and they're no worse, and in some respects better than a lot of stuff from that period. I think you'd have to say, you have to put that on record, that it's not a terrible. We talked about this last time. I know I'm repeating myself, but not a terrible game system. But you're right. The scenarios are excellent, and I'm reading that Face of the Enemy. I was reading it thinking, I'm going to file this under. I'm going to file this away somewhere, because there could come a point where I could use this.
Well, let's put those back on the shelf. I'm going to have a look at Face of the Enemy. I think it can become a convention one-shot with a bit of work. I think all of these can. It's just, as I say, finding the core of it. Thanks, Blythe. I'll get me coat. Welcome back to the Zoom of Role-Playing Rambling. I've got Blythe with me, and we're heading towards the door with our coats on, still extending the chat, a bit of closing time chatter. I went to see the D&D film, Honor Amongst Thieves.
Yeah.
You haven't been yet, have you?
I've not been to see it. I suspect, because of various work pressures at the moment, it's quite difficult to find the time.
Well, and I know as a gamer, apparently you've got to have an opinion on it, haven't you? You've got to, for some reason.
Yeah, you have, but it's not. I mean, I will watch it at some point. I will watch it, and I'm kind of looking forward to watching it. But it's not It's not a game, is it? It's a film.
Isn't
It's not a game. It's not a game. It's a film about the game, but it's not a game.
But non-gamers who
Mm.
ask you, don't they? Oh, have you seen the D&D film? Then you got to have a view on it.
Well, all my family have said, "Oh, you must watch that. You must watch that. You like D&D. You must watch that, mustn't you?" Then I'm saying that I will at some point. They seem more keen on me watching it than I'm keen than I am. So people are saying, "Have you not seen it?" And people who don't, like you said, people who don't play it, I said, "Have you not seen it yet?" "Oh, I thought you'd be first in the queue for that." Well, not really, no, because it's not a game. It's a film about a game. It'll be interesting to watch, but it's not a game. I like playing the game, not watching film.
Do you want to write down these opinions then? I'm not going to give any spoilers because you'll enjoy watching it. But when you next asked,
I will enjoy it. I'm expecting to enjoy it, but at the same time, I will go with a certain attitude that will help me enjoy it. In as much as I'll be thinking, I kind of know what to expect, but it's okay for it to be the way I'm expecting it to be. Do you see what I mean? I have some kind of presuppositions about it that will help me enjoy it.
What I'd say about it is that it has got the D&D feels. You always say, don't you, when we did Dragon Heist, there's something weird about the Forgotten Realms setting. There's something weird about having a wizard living next door to a dragonborn who has a tiefling as a friend. That kind of world where there's strange disparities between people living together in different levels of power and different levels of strangeness, I guess. And it does capture that to some extent. It's like, the way I describe it, it's like going to a D&D theme park.
Yeah. And I suppose that's what I mean by my presuppositions about it. I'm expecting it to be like that, and I'm not bothered that it's like that. So I'll probably enjoy it when I watch it because I'm going to it thinking it'll be, almost thinking it'll be like a D&D theme park. That's what I'm expecting it to be like. So don't expect anything other than that.
The pleasure comes from seeing like little nods and winks to people who play the games, because there's quite a lot of those kind of little in-jokes, and seeing the monsters, displayed on the screen is good. But yeah, a mid-ranking theme park. It's not quite Happy Mount Park in Morecambe, but it's not quite the Magic Kingdom.
It's not quite Disneyland, but it's not Happy Mount Park in Morecambe. Is it Alton Towers?
Yeah, it's mid-range.
Alton Towers standard. Mid-range theme for Alton Towers. Yeah, all right. Oh, that's all right. Yeah. That's kind of what I would expect it to be, yeah.
It's committed to what it's doing, and I think that's always a good thing, isn't it? The performances are good. I think the standout is Hugh Grant, because he revives his character from Paddington 2.
With all these films, that is actually the issue, isn't it? The commitment of the people making it and the cast. So that sometimes shines through, or either way, it either comes through that they're not very committed to it, or it comes through that they are committed to it. And it does make a difference in terms of the quality of it. So, I mean, on a similar subject, I recently watched the Last of Us. The Last of Us, the one.
Oh yeah, I've not got around to watching that yet.
Which is excellent. I really enjoyed it. And that's based on a video game. And I've never played the game. My daughter was into the game. She wanted to watch it. She's a big fan of the game, and I've never played the game. But if you watch it, you can't tell it's based on a game. You wouldn't go, this is based on a game. Even though my daughter watching it said, oh yeah, that bit's in the game, that bit's in the game, that bit's in the game. But they've altered it and done things to it to make it credible as a TV show. So it was interesting to watch it with her, because I suppose she was doing what I'll do when I watch the D&D film. She was seeing all the nods and winks to the people who played the game, whereas I was completely blind to that because I've not played the game. But we both enjoyed it in equal measure, because and I think it's that the people making that were committed to making something. They didn't go, oh, it's based on a video game. Oh God, I just saw a lot of video game stuff in for the video game fans, and it'll be fine. It's a lot of old.
Yeah.
They hadn't approached it like that. They actually approached it very, very seriously, and it's quite an emotional show. There's bits in it where you think, "Oh my God, this is quite harrowing," and you think, "Oh, it's based on a video game. This is great," But I think it is that. It is the commitment of the people in it and the people making it that makes all the difference. And that is why a lot of fantasy films of the past have failed, because people are just not committed to it, have they? They just think it's rubbish for the kids,
It's a good point. My son, who has no interest in role-playing games, no matter how hard to try, he thought the D&D movie was great, much better than I did. So I think for the filmmakers, that is achievement unlocked, isn't it? He has no interest in it whatsoever, but he thought it was a good adventure film. There's one false scene before we move on where they have a halfling in it, and it uses all the false perspective thing. It reminded me of Little Britain, Dennis Waterman thing. I fully expected a polystyrene hand to give him a cup,
Give him a massive ice cream cone or something like that. There you go, little halfling, have an ice cream. Oh, it's huge.
But apart from that, they get away with it. I think.
Yeah, it would have been okay. You've ruined it by putting a halfling in, which is, to be honest, that is like most games of D&D, isn't it? They're okay until someone plays a halfling, and then it's ruined a bit. Is there a cleric in it?
There's a paladin. That doesn't count, does it?
So they don't put a cleric in. I'm right about them, aren't I? I'm right. Everyone knows. Don't.
Have you got anything to add to the closing time chatter? Given that you're greasing the wheels of local democracy.
Greasing the wheels. Sounds like. I've been very, very busy, but I had a thought. It's an interesting point of discussion that we can end on. What reading text box when you're running an adventure? At Virtual Grogmeet, we played a fantastic adventure with Steph, didn't we? With Sorrel and Claire, Cthulhu adventure.
Really good. Highly recommended. I'll put a link in the show notes. Very good.
Yeah, very, very good. And Steph read bits of text box, and you've done it as well. We've been playing Conan. You've done a little bit of that as well, haven't you, recently?
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I always feel when I'm running the game like I shouldn't do that, like it's cheating. But when you've done it and when Steph did it, actually it was really good because it added to the atmosphere. I'm kind of guilty, I think, sometimes when I'm running a game of having these ideas in my head, and as the game plays along, missing bits of bits of atmosphere, bits of the smells or the sounds and that kind of thing. Whereas when you read a text box, actually you give the players a bit of that, don't you? But I always feel like I shouldn't do that. Don't read the text box. But I might change my mind on that. I might do that more often, because when I played like the Conan game we've been playing, you've done it, Steph did it, and other people I've played with as well recently, just by coincidence, have done it as well. And I'm sitting there listening to them and thinking, it's okay. This, why do I think it's not okay? But it is okay.
You tend to feel like to be purist about it, you feel like you're putting it on rails, because you're putting a marker in time where you're almost delivering a checkpoint. So you want to disguise that a little bit, don't you? You want to disguise the frame that it's built on. And there's this aversion to do it because you feel like you're revealing that actually you've hit a point where you need to hit.
Or it's like you're revealing the strings in a puppet show. Yeah. You show the strings, or you've a little glimpse backstage because you're just reading a bit of text. But yeah.
But I've been doing it for the Conan thing. I normally paraphrase, but they are quite well written, the ones for this the Conan scenario that we're doing, and they are evocative. And if I think sometimes when you paraphrase and improvise around some of that box text, you diminish it a little.
Yeah,
because
that's what I mean. That's my point. That you tend to kind of think, well, I won't read it verbatim, but then you perhaps miss little subtle things, subtle elements of description that are quite evocative for the players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Box text or not box text? That's a discussion, isn't it?
I imagine it's controversial viewing, but I must admit I'm inclined to think there are times, maybe not all the time, but there are times when it's not such a bad thing. It's actually quite a good thing, because I think it can frame.
It comes back to that. It comes back, doesn't it, to that kind of I don't know, pride that that seems like that's like a basic role playing. That's a basic D&D approach. I am advanced, and as an advanced operator, I elevate myself above the box text and able to freeform around these ideas. And I think I'm guilty of that. Snobbery, I think it's called, isn't it? I
think it is a bit of that. I suppose it's like the idea that of reading a speech, apparently not reading it, like just a free form, stand up and give an inspiring speech or a comical or witty speech, whereas someone who reads a witty speech somehow is not quite the same thing. But I don't think, but that's the parallel in your head, or parallel in my head, that you should just be, hey, I'm a games master, I'm just imaginative and I can just go with it. Yeah, but it's not quite like that when you're running a game. It's not quite the same as giving a speech, is it? Or something like that, or a presentation. It's not quite the same. Reading a bit of text, it's good for the players. Because what I've realised is quite like listening to them. I like listening to it and thinking, oh yeah, it's giving me a bit of sense of sights and sounds. In Steph's game, the woods we were in and the stuff that was going on. It was great because it brought it alive in a way. So it's that odd split, isn't it? Of, as a games master, I think, I don't want to read text verbatim, but when I'm a player, I quite like it. I think it's good. It works. It brings things alive and that kind of thing. You just sit back, listen to what's going on. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Yeah, I know where we are and what's going on, that kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting. Just recently, I've just played in quite a few games where people have done that. It just made me think about it a bit more, consider it a bit more.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to that thing, is when you're playing, whether you read box text or not, you don't read box text. It's keeping in mind that idea that to frame a scene is so important, to make sure that everybody is aware of what they're facing, some of the evocative stuff around it, just to get those important details so they can locate themselves and know what actions are possible from that point. So whether you're reading box text or not, I think you're right. I think it is just an essential bit of role playing, that skill of framing what's going on right at the start of it. I'll let you go, and we've got through it, Blythe. We've managed to do it. We've managed to do this as a phone call.
The curse of Star Frontiers is, isn't it? You're saying that,
I think,
when you listen to the recording back, it'd be blank, or maybe the curse.
Yeah, there's something like that. It's some kind of safer plot, isn't it, to prevent us from doing it? The worms are everywhere. See you later, Blythe.
Goodbye.
The Save for Half podcast covers old school gaming and the modern games inspired by them. Listen in to hear about games from the 70s and 80s as well as their modern descendants. You can download episodes wherever podcasts are found on iTunes, Google, and other fine podcast distributors. You should also check them out on saveforhalf.com or email them at saveforhalfpodcast@gmail.com.
Don't go hunting for those second-hand Star Frontiers stuff, because it's available online at a reasonable price and print on demand. They are really interesting modules. If you're a fan of the cartography of Jeff Wingate, aka Paul Rouse, whose work appeared in Imagine magazine, then I really recommend Bugs in the System and Dark Side of the Moon, as they both feature some of his best work. Remember to head to the Discord channel and look for the Grog Tank, which features Wayne Peters' thread reading through old issues of Imagine magazine month by month. Thanks to Wayne for his submission to Appendix G. If you'd like your entry and for you to appear on an episode, then please let me know. Thank you for all the support that continues to come our way. Some new people have discovered us recently, which is always encouraging. If you have recently discovered the Grog Pod, then please pass it on. The best thing to keep this show on the road is to let people know about it. Thanks to the retweets, the Mastodon, whatever you do on there, and substacking, the Facebooking, and reviewing, doing your bit to find fellow Grog Squadders who don't realise that they're Grog Squadders yet. Thanks to all the patrons, old and new, that have contributed to a tip jar to encourage us to continue. When Phil the IT guy stops us in our tracks, the thought of our Patreons ensures that we start the engine up again, even on those cold morning hill starts. And we've had some new patrons joining us in 2023. Welcome to the Armchair Adventurers to Thomas McGrenery, Ego Orb, and James L. Stewart. For those who join us at the Sofa So Good level and above, we like to roll on a virtual table to give them a virtual gift, apparently at random. And this time we're looking at Star Frontier's equipment. So let me get the cursed dice cup and roll here. Okay, here goes. First up is Jean-Pierre Oliver, and he gets a Doze grenade. Be careful how you throw it. Next up is George Poles. I know George because he played in Planescape with me recently and had an audacious plan to move the gate to the Modrons. Here we go. Let's roll on here. And George, you get a CAS, a computerized analysis scanner. There you go. Next up is Aaron Yarborough, and he gets a needler gun. Finally, John Ozaway. And again, I've played with John recently a Star Wars game where I played an Ewok, a rather scruffy Ewok who was covered in dung for most of it. Anyway, here we go. John, you get a gyrojet rifle, aka a cone rifle. Thanks all. Playing us out this time is another composition by Dirk Jr. And his guys as Amari. It's a suitably electronica space age feeling piece named Helix. Next time we'll be talking to John Cohen of Tale of the Manticore and going to the pub with our wigs on for Thunder Phase. Until then, adios amigos.